innovation drives social change? What is the Omidyar Network's philosophy about this? And how do we experience that kind of change happen? I also want to touch a little bit on how we measure this, because I think when we're dealing with social innovation and social change, the measurement of impact is a really difficult task. And so what we try and do is to set metrics and markers, and I'll come on and talk about some of the early steps in doing this. Where do I point this? Just change it on the laptop. Okay, right. So we are what's called in the business a philanthropic investment firm, which is a quite slightly strange animal. We are both a foundation, a grant-making foundation, and we're also an investment company. So we both support both for-profit and non-profit organisations in the initiatives in which we're trying to drive social change. So we were set up in 2004 by Pam and Pierre Omidyar. Pierre Omidyar, some of you may have known, those of you involved in technology, is the founder of eBay. So he has a very deep interest in technology. He and his family have now devoted most of their wealth and have pledged most of their wealth to try and drive social change and social innovation. Our belief, and this is something again that as Wasili mentioned earlier on, is that every person has the power to make a difference, but what they do is they lack opportunity. So partly what we're trying to do is to provide that opportunity and to drive that change focused on the individual. Our approach is to support entrepreneurial ventures that have potential for massive scale and impact. And to date, we've committed a large amount of money, $810 million over the last 10 years. About 358 million of that is for-profit investments, and the remainder, 452, is non-profit grants, and that's worldwide. Can we go to the next slide? We focus on market-based approaches, and that we think that can actually foster massive social impact. We believe in innovation and technology. Again, given the eBay heritage, there's no surprise there. But we're also very much invested in this idea of growing the impact investing space. The idea of investing behind companies that have as their mission and as their outcome positive social change. We believe in entrepreneurship, we believe in scale, and we believe in the power of the individual to drive that particular scale. The other thing which we do is support organisations with human capital support. And there's a number, I'm really pleased to see a number of the investees that we support in the room. There's Andela, there's Hotels NG, there's Paga, there's Budget, CC Hub, and many others. And one of the things that we believe is that it's not enough just to invest financing. You've also got to follow that up with expertise, with management support, with governance, a whole wide range of different things that help young companies and young organizations grow. And that, I think, is the kind of secret sauce that differentiates us, perhaps, from other donors and investors in this area, is that commitment to provide additional social capital and human capital. Next one. Is this working now? Where do I press? Yeah. Just point it there. Whoop. Okay, so I mentioned that we both support for-profit and non-profit organizations across the different initiatives. And these are the 5 areas which we work in. I can remember these, so I don't need the slide. Number 1 is education. And we heard a number of the questions and comments about the importance of education in terms of driving social change, and the really important investment in young people's understanding of the world, young people's understanding of the market and business and so on. So education is something that we focus on, and particularly a range of different edtech investments that we've supported as well, and building that kind of capacity from K through 12, and then also for vocational education, specialized education, which helps drive jobs as well. Consumer internet and mobile, again, technology is part of our DNA, is part of the lettering through the organization. So we particularly focus on applications and technologies that connect people around common interests. connect people around issues that they care about. They could be social media, they could be a range of different platforms and so on. Financial inclusion. Paga is one of our investments, and we like their kind of approach to drive that ability to access capital using technology to get financial inclusion to a wider group of the population. The area which I lead is around governance and citizen engagement. And that's both in terms of empowering individuals to be better informed about the way government works, about the services that are delivered, but also on the other hand is to Egghead's point, to support governments to be more free, fair, effective and responsive to their citizens. Because it's not government is not a homogeneous body. It's not they're the bad ones, NGOs and civil society organizations the good ones. There are champions within government we need to work with in order to make reform happen. And that's very much a part of our approach. And then finally, but last but certainly not least, is property rights. We believe that giving people secure land title, giving people access to land as an asset is a really important part of driving economic growth. And there are some really interesting ways in which that can be done. So we work closely with the investees, as I was mentioning before. The human capital element is a really important part of what we do. We also leverage the network. And one of the things which we really like about CC Hub is the way in which it acts as a network node. It brings people together. It helps build those ecosystems. And I know the last time that I was here, and this is a shameful admission to me, but the last time I was here in CC Hub, and I've got a photo that I'll try and bring up later to show you, is with me, Femi, and Bosun in this empty room here in 2011, where this was the germ of an idea that they'd had. We got behind it, and you can see the growth in both the sectors and also the area, which has made Yaba now such an interesting, innovative and exciting place to work and live. And I think that's one of the things that we think the network is really important about. There are many good examples. Credit to the guys at the back. There are many good examples of how our investees support each other and have worked with each other. We can be the catalyst, we can bring them together, but they will benefit from speaking to people who are facing similar problems in growing a business, growing an organization, and trying to develop the kind of change that they want to see. The last point is also important as well, and this is something which we're really keen on seeing happening, is the development of locally responsive and thoughtful philanthropy and impact investing. And I'll come on to talk a little bit about that later. But for example, in India, we've been part of a movement to try and get Indian philanthropists to support impact investing and particularly governance issues. And the context with that is the Indian government tries to close down the civic space, is that they are attacking organizations that accept foreign funding. And this is a very easy thing to do. These are agents of kind of foreign powers and so on. What we're trying to do is to get Indian philanthropists to step up to the plate and go beyond supporting the hospitals and the temples that they had traditionally supported, but looking at ways in which they can be involved in impact investing and in social innovation as well. So there's a similar movement that is going on here on the continent as well, and that's something we want to encourage. So just to give you a quick overview of the two different sectors and why we think they're important. And here we think about these as being mutually supportive and complementary. So non-profit grants, not everything is going to have a business plan and a business model. There are some public goods that require grant funding, that require support at a relatively early stage. The second is that in some cases you've got to work with disempowered populations through grant funding at an early stage. So there's issues around education, there's issues around health, there's issues around governance that require non-profit grants and organizations to help make that early steps and to support some of those public goods. And they also generate positive externalities as well. Supporting immunization campaigns benefits the individuals, but it also benefits the society as a whole as well. So we believe that non-profit grants have a really important part to play in achieving the kind of objectives we want to see in those 5 initiatives I outlined. And here's some examples. You'll see some of the organizations we've supported here in Nigeria, but also in other parts of the continent as well. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a snapshot of the great organizations that we've helped to support. But we also believe that flexible capital, for-profit investments are really important as well. People get value from things that they want to pay for, and then that helps drive businesses, it helps drive economic growth. And so this is, you can still pay for something that also provides societal value, we believe as well. And there's a couple of examples of this. There's an organization we support called D-Light, which manufactures affordable solar lanterns. And you've been out to many of the rural areas in this country and others, I'm sure, and seen the problem of electricity, about people's access to power being a major block on social development, on education. Children can't do their homework in the evening, people aren't able to transport goods, and so on and so forth. D-Light have produced a suite of different solar-powered lanterns, home solar kits, and so on, which sell at very affordable prices. They're now shifting something like 500,000 solar lanterns a month, and are now cash flow positive as a business. Now, they've also attracted other funders as well. So we put in some money as an early investment a couple of years ago, but through support from us and through others, they've now attracted money from Kozler Impact Ventures, from Bill Gates himself, from Mark Zuckerberg, from DFID and others. So this is a growing business, and the product itself has a positive social impact. So that's kind of one example. And there's also this issue of self-sustainability, and I know many of you who work for non-profits in the room will be struggling with this all the time, is that where does our next grant come from? How are we going to rely on that donor? What happens if they change their strategy? With a for-profit business, is a very simple rule at play here. If you're providing value, if people are willing to pay for it, you're going to be making a profit and you're going to be self-sustaining before too long. And also it has the opportunity for massive scale. Most non-profits find it very difficult to scale. One example I give of one which is an exception to that is BRAC, which is in Bangladesh. Now it's one of the largest organizations in the world, focusing on education, on health, on economic development. It's treating and it's benefiting more than 135 million people every year in Bangladesh and a range of other countries. It's got $450 million a year worth of revenue, and it's 80% self-sustaining. That's an example of a non-profit that's scaled. But you can think of many thousands of for-profit organizations that have scaled. So that's kind of one of the things we also think is very positive about that combination of non-profit and for-profit. And here's some of the examples of for-profit companies that we've supported here on the continent, and of course some of them, Andela, Hotels NG, Paga, here in Nigeria and here in Yaba as well. We also, I mentioned D-Light earlier on, we also think that innovation is a key part of that success story. Doing things differently, being disruptive, looking at new ways of approaching a particular problem, and of helping to bring about social change as well. So M-Pesa, we can't claim any credit for that, but I know that many of you will know that as a familiar story, and Paga obviously are trying to do the same here. The idea of mobile money, being able to provide people with that opportunity to pay bills, to send remittances back to their village, to be able to do easy, quick transactions, has completely transformed the Kenyan economy. Now more than 70% of Kenyan GDP goes through M-Pesa, which is a phenomenal success story in the last 10 years. And it's been replicated in many other countries around the world. So that kind of innovation, both of the innovation of the idea, but also the innovation of the technology, the mobile phone, is also something that has been transformative to that particular sector. The other one, which some of you may be familiar with, is a company we've supported called Micro-Insure. One of the problems we found in emerging markets is that many people don't have access to insurance products. Life insurance, travel insurance, home insurance, and so on. It's unaffordable, or it's unavailable to many people. What MicroInsure have done is provided affordable, small insurance policies which are particularly targeted at people in lower income classes in the developing world. But what has really fired up their business is that they've done a deal with Airtel to provide that insurance as part of someone's contract. Now, one of the problems that Airtel and many other mobile phone providers have, of course, is that churn, is that people will transfer to another provider if they get a better deal. So customer loyalty is a massive problem. So by providing micro-insurance as part of that contract, they've really helped to retain customers, and they've also provided a real benefit to the individual as well, a product that they've never had before. So I'd mentioned before about building that supportive environment, why that's really important to start to see that kind of cluster of activities and the network effect happen. CC Hub, of course, you know well, and these are a couple of the other of the innovation centres that we've supported in other parts of the world. iHub in Kenya, Josie Hub in Johannesburg, Tummel, which is an incubator particularly for social businesses and civic tech businesses in San Francisco, and then most recently in Myanmar, in Yangon, Pandiyar, which is the first developer tech and innovation centre in the country. Then we also realised that you've got to be able to provide some of the supporting services, the research, you know, GSMA, helping people understand mobile money better, Better Than Cash Alliance, which is an advocacy organisation working with governments around financial inclusion. These are essential parts of the building blocks to see that social change happen. It doesn't just happen by supporting the individual entrepreneur. We'd like to think it does, but the reality is that you need that regulatory environment, you need the support of government, you need that cluster effect of other ancillary businesses, of banks, of finance institutions to make this kind of thing work. So just a couple of last slides on measuring impact, and I would say that this is something which is a work in progress for us. We don't have the answers, but this is just some of the ways in which we've approached the problem. Because we recognise there's a huge gap between making an investment and seeing the impact. There's a whole range of other influences on that sector. So for example, if we take financial inclusion, one of the things we're trying to do is to get more of the populations who are underbanked into a banking system, or to have access to some kind of capital. Now that's our overall objective. Now there's a big leap between investing in PAGA or any other financial inclusion organisation and then seeing the numbers of underbanked reduce around the world. So how do we track that? What are the different inputs we have to make? So if you look at the actions and interventions, there's the investments on the top, there's the human capital, which are directed towards the success of these investments. But then we also recognise that there's a whole wide range of other external players and influences that will make that change happen. Target audiences, they could be government, they could be other businesses, they could be the regulatory bodies and so on. Who are the aligned interests in each of these sectors? So what we're trying to do as we think about education and governance, consumer internet and mobile and others, is to really understand what that system map looks like. What are the levers we've got to apply? What are the buttons we've got to push? And also, we've got to recognise that we're a relatively small player in this field. So it's about being catalytic, it's about being targeted. And we think about this in two ways. One's are things that are close in, that we can influence, and then the others are much further out, that we, with the support to other advocacy organisations, to other players in the sector, can start to see some incremental change happen. But it's very difficult for us to say, okay, an investment in PAGA in Nigeria, a relatively small but growing company, is going to transform Nigeria's financial inclusion landscape. It's going to be one of the influences, but it's not going to be the sole one. So we've got to think about what are the other influences, what are the other actions that we've got to bring to bear. So that could be policy change. It could be additional funding to a given area from outside partners. How do we crowd in other capital to to help that kind of change happen. So lastly, just to come back to something which I mentioned before, we see the impact investing arena being much more attractive because it firstly is starting to prove to have returns on investment. And yesterday there was a very interesting report which was produced by the GIN, which is the Global Impact Investing Network, and a consultancy called Cambridge Associates, which tracked and compared the impact investing, investing for social change portfolios over a period of the last 7 to 8 years with mainstream investments from venture capital and private equity. And it showed, which was really encouraging, that you can get a return on that investment on impact investing equal to that of the more traditional asset classes as well. Because that's always been some of the accusation, is that, oh, this is great, but this is corporate social responsibility. You know, you're never going to make money out of products that benefit poor people. But actually what's interesting is that the GIN have now started to track those different asset classes and have done this in a very systematic and robust way over the last 5 years, and have shown that the returns you can expect are equal to those that you would do if you were investing in hotels and railways and other kind of mainstream investments. So that's encouraging for our sector, because that reduces some of the barriers for entry of other investors. But also what we're starting to see are other investment funds starting to come into this space in Africa. So Sacha Capital and TPG, again, this is Mo Ibrahim's, Sacha Capital is Mo Ibrahim's venture capital fund, have done a deal with TPG, which is a big US-based fund, to bring in funds particularly to look at impact investing and small-scale entrepreneurs over the next 5 years. Tony Elumelu, of course, familiar to many of you here, has also put funding behind this and is trying to support that impact investing. Equity, Shuttleworth, DG Murray Trust in South Africa are also putting money into this asset class as well. So we're starting to see momentum behind this movement. It's not just a US-based or European-based movement, but what we're also seeing is that many other African investors are also starting to take seriously the opportunities to drive social change through for-profit investment as well as through non-profit grants.